Well, tell us about the time that Alan almost fell off the ship. Do you know about that, Elizabeth?
No. That's my
Oh, yes. I wish you
guilt.
weren't right in the sun.
That's the heaviest guilt that I have hanging over me.
Okay, tell us about Alan now. How did you almost get rid of him?
I'll tell you, this is the story that has permeated my entire life. The thing that happened in this story, I still have a dream about it, in some phase of it. I've been visiting in New Orleans, and living in Greenwich Village, and I'd spent about 2 months down in New Orleans with Mommy and Daddy, and decided to take a sea voyage home. So at that time there was a ship called the Dixie that just went up along the coast. It never went out of sight of land, actually, but that was good enough for me. So I felt so excited and sporting, and I read and seen pictures of people walking the decks and all that business. So I was and Alan was 18 months old, and maybe he was 2 years old, because he didn't have to hold my hand. And I would walk around the deck, and as I'd walk around the deck, I'd pick up different people, and we'd talk, and I was having
Pick him up.
We have a wonderful time. I mean, different other groups would be walking, because in those days you walked all the way around the deck. That was the thing you did, especially when you were just 12 miles from land, and you were having your first sea voyage, and that was the case. And there was this dentist who was so much in the spirit of his sea voyage that he had a yachting cap on, and he was paying me a lot of attention, and I was swallowing all this wonderful flattery, and Alan was scampering ahead of us, and all of a sudden I looked down, and just about 10 feet away from me, Alan was just about to climb under the divot that the lifeboat hangs on, which clears the deck about a foot, maybe 18 inches, and there's no rail on the other side so that they can get the lifeboat entirely out in an emergency. It's just ocean. And if I just could visualize that he was going to drop on over. And I promise you that at that moment, I can feel that feeling right this minute, I would have jumped on over there and never would have been able to save him, but I sure wouldn't have been able to have to survive it.
So you were flirting with this man, and then...
Yes, I certainly, that's one time I'll admit it. I was really flirting. And I was feeling that this was a shipboard romance, you know. But innocent. But from that time on, about 5 or 6 times a year, I have these dreams about this little 2-year-old boy that comes to all kinds of harm from my neglect. And Mary Catherine teases me about it all the time, because I say I dreamt about the baby last night, because I will be off someplace and I will discover that I haven't fed him for 2 or 3 days, and he's still alive and just as cheerful and nice as he can possibly be. Other times he falls great distances, or he gets into horrible situations in which he's about to be crushed, and something stops and it's not crushed at the last minute, and it's a recurrent dream that's haunted me all my life about how close he came. And one time I was telling this to my grandson, Cliff, and he had a perfectly horrified expression on his face, and I said, "What's the matter, Cliff?" And he says, "Well, just think, in that case, if Alan had fallen in and you had jumped in after him, I never would have been born." So then we took it from there, and we began to think of all the things that had happened to everybody in the family, which would have resulted in his not being born.
Well, like, what if you hadn't had those miscarriages, for instance?
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't have been born. I'm the last.
Yeah,
Unless you, did you plan to have 8 children or something?
No, I certainly didn't plan to have 8 children.
Just think.
4. But you don't want that.
No. Although those would be good to get later on in one of our, you know.
Yeah.
Those would be interesting, how each one happened and everything like that.
Yes.
Well, tell us about more. How many times did you have these little flirtations after you got married?
Oh, I didn't have any flirtations, but that was one thing that John said. I complained because he would never pay any attention to me when we went to dances or anything. And he'd say, well, in the social situation, nothing is more rude and boring than for the husband and wife to stick together and whisper, and to the exclusion of everybody else. You're supposed to spread yourself all over the whole party and make it hum. So he really did it. And when I was first
Did that
married,
make you jealous of it?
I was so jealous that I was absolutely miserable, especially one time when my Uncle John Nixon had a perfectly enormous costume party out on the lawn of his Victorian house in
New Rochelle?
Noroton, Connecticut.
Oh, no.
And hundreds of people were there. And I had on a little crinoline, and my hair's divided in the middle and demurely brought down into a little knot, and I looked just about as homely as anything you've ever seen in your life. It was a big mistake of a costume that I got. And he had on a very dashing red velvet coat, yes, and a waistcoat, and he looked so handsome, and I didn't even see him. I didn't even know whether he was there, because I never wore my glasses in those days, and so when I took my glasses off, I couldn't find him. So I was in a terrible state. That was the most jealous time I've ever been.
Were you